Great. All right. Thanks for joining us for 7 tips for firing up your content for nonprofit marketing. Again, I'm Patty Lehn. I'm the Executive Director of Farm Wisconsin. And, whoops. I just wanted, that might not make a lot of sense. Why is the Executive Director of Farm Wisconsin doing a presentation on content marketing? I would say we haven't been showcasing best practices maybe for a while for our in communicating to our audiences, but I just do want to say we've been getting our house in order and really being introspective about redefining our purpose and making sure we're all on the same page and going in the same direction. So a lot of what you hear me say today, we will be implementing in real time in the coming days and weeks and months at Farm Wisconsin. I will talk a little bit more about my background throughout the presentation, but as you might have seen when you registered for this presentation, my whole career has been in marketing and content development. So that is a great deal of what I am drawing from. So fear not, we will have many other experiences to be working from. So I just thought in this time, this unprecedented time, I was trying to think of a visual for how I have been. A lot of times I like to tease with my board that I'm riding a roller coaster. I really do try to find the positives, but we have all experienced so many negatives. And being that today is the NFL draft, I thought a good visual might be this New England Patriot football, of how we are sometimes feeling, especially in the nonprofit world, a little deflated. So I guess as part of my goals for today is to give you some ideas, whether you take specific examples out of this presentation or if you just get a nugget that gives you an idea for something else that you can do. I'm hoping that you might think about new strategies. When you think about content, if you're thinking about that mostly in the written word, and that's very intimidating for a lot of people, I want to provide some tools to get through writer's blocks. I want you to think about not carrying the whole load yourself, so diversifying your sources. I certainly want to inject some enthusiasm into your content, and I want to empower you ultimately to change your mindset so you don't feel like a deflated football anymore and you get to the top of that roller coaster. So let's jump right in. My first tip for you today is to absolutely plot your objectives. Now, I have listed what some of those objectives might be. I think we have a pretty diverse audience watching this presentation today, so you might have very different objectives. So maybe your primary objective as a nonprofit is to engage your donors. I want you to physically write that out. I want you to have your objectives before you delve into your content. Your objectives should guide everything you do. And that sounds like a no-brainer, but I have found it all through my career that, you get suggestions from other people. Maybe it's your volunteers, your board, your colleagues, and they always go straight to the tactics. And it's really easy to want to say yes to those ideas, but please be selfish for your organization about plotting your objectives. I will also say that as you do that, please keep in the back of your mind, because I limited this, we only have an hour today, and I'm really going to try not to talk for that whole hour, because I really do encourage you to interrupt me with your questions. I really don't mind that. In fact, I would appreciate the break. But I have limited, we're limited to our hour. I will try to keep it to like 40 minutes. But I could go on for an entire webinar about measurement. So I do not address that other than this slide. So as you're plotting out your objectives, keep in mind that you want those objectives to be measurable, and think about what is possible for you to measure those. Worst case scenario is anecdotal evidence, but if you can somehow figure out ways to measure whatever you put down as your objectives, you will be set up to be able to report on them much better. And I'll just highlight one of the other things too that I've found throughout my career. No matter where I have worked, what organizations, there are always myths. And so your content, I would think that dispelling myths could be a really good objective, or maybe it's one of your strategies if you have other primary objectives that outweigh, but your content should be your opportunity to have people better understand you and therefore to dispel your myths. All right. I will also note that I can make this presentation available. So if you're not wanting to take notes, but you do want to have this in your back pocket, I'll be happy to send it to you. Tip number 2 is consider the blog format. So for many, I have come to the point where blogging for me, when I consider content marketing, I'm thinking of the blog immediately. So here is where I'll just pause and give you a little bit of my background so that makes a little more sense. My most recent past in my career has been in higher education. I came from Marine Park Technical College, and before that I was working at a community college in Illinois as a marketing director. And we really faced a lot of communication challenges in higher education. When you're representing a large institution like a college, you're certainly representing a very diverse product. Just think of all the majors of the colleges around here. So how I really had a hard time wrapping my head around how we communicate in a concise way that feels authentic, that really represents our whole institution. So I knew that I wanted to blog, and I will say number 2 on our list here under why I would like you to consider the blog was my number 1. Increase search engine optimization. And you want, when people are searching for key terms associated with your industry, you want them to find you. And search engines like Google are looking for frequently updated content. And guess what? That is the definition of a blog. It is frequently updated content. So here I am at this, and this is a while ago already. This is probably 12 years ago that I knew I wanted to blog. I knew that the college, prior to me getting there, had tried blogging through students, and they determined that it was a failure because guess what? College students aren't totally reliable. I know that's hard to imagine. So they stopped blogging, and I just did not want to give up on that. I just thought, how do we get our diverse voices out there? Who can I rely on? And if you know anything about higher education marketing, the marketing department might not be the top department that people in the college and faculty are listening to. So I was really challenged to know who I could rely on. And I did not feel qualified to be able, that our department were subject matter experts in all of the topics that our college needed to communicate on. So we actually, I'll share a tip on that, on how we got the blog started. So I had wanted to start a blog for years, and it wasn't until I was there for about 4 years that we finally started our blog. But blogs can be very timely. And I say that from 2 different perspectives. Number 1, when you are writing other types of content, writing or broadcasting or whatever, you might not want to address things that are in the news because you want your content to live on, but a blog allows you that opportunity to have it time-stamped so that, number 1, you can react really quickly to something that might be very timely, and number 2, because of the timestamp on a blog, it's all taken into the context of the time that you addressed it. So if there's a timestamp for 2020, people know, oh yeah, that was the year of the pandemic. So it also allows for personality, which is one of my favorite parts also of a blog, is every all of the writing I have done in my career, I have always previously tried to be really professional and in the tone of my institution that I was working for. The blog entry allows those individual personalities to come out, and it allows the brand personality to also be very obvious, fairly obvious. And because of that, you can build relationship with your target audience and establish yourself, and I'll get into sharing the load later, but becoming a subject matter expert. And feeds your social media strategy, which is a segue into my next slide. And so I just see the question right now. I'm just going to take a little break for a question. Thank you, Donna, for this question. I see, and it is, I see a lot of content development systems on sale now, kind of like the old Franklin Planner, and I love that reference. I do not actually use one of those. I use, whoops, I'm going to, I have used a just basic old spreadsheet. That is what I find works for me. But if you are a Franklin Planner kind of person, then absolutely, I encourage you to use a system that works for you. Oops, let me get back into here now. So here is, again, so you're going to be seeing a blog at Farm Wisconsin, just breaking news. You will see more blogging here in the coming weeks. So when I say you will see this, some of the techniques today implemented in real time, I mean it. But since I do have the background in higher education, I will just reference a screenshot here of the Moraine Park blog, which we started when I was there. This is a recent post that they have, but this gives you an idea of what a blog can look like. I'm a huge fan of WordPress, by the way. It's because it's an open source blog platform. There are so many people using it that you can benefit from the successes of others and the lessons that others have learned before you quite easily. And there are so many great plugins because of that. So Moraine Park's blog, I just wanted to feature here the fact that this is kind of what it can look like. You can set it up many different ways, but typically there's a news feed and then also categories and a search function. So that allows, again, when I said it can be a content management system, all of the blog entries that have been done since we started the Moraine Park blog still live within blog.morainepark.edu, but you can find things from the past very easily by either using the search function or searching the categories. This is scrolling down further on that screen, or you can notice that this blog entry that is open here was written April 16th by this faculty member. So if you clicked on her name, you would be able to see any other blog entries that she has written. And if you, same as you click on the categories, you would see other related content. And that was an additional benefit of the blog, is that, hey, even though I'm in this diverse institution in higher education, I like this article, I want to see more like this, so I'm going to click on the category to see more like this. Right? So tip number 3, repurpose. Repurpose. My colleagues at Farm Wisconsin are getting a little bit tired of hearing this, I'm sure by now, because we are really trying, we're using this, as many of you I'm sure are, we're using this time of the pandemic when we can't be at work and we can't have people visiting Farm Wisconsin. We are trying to make the most of this time for planning. So voila, we are planning our blog and we are planning other content. So one of the things that we are doing right now is we are planning activity pages. We're developing activity pages that parents and educators can use to educate their kids about Wisconsin agriculture. Well, guess what? I don't want that content to live just on that activity page. So the content will reside in the blog, and then we'll push it out in an email to educators. We will push it to our activity page, And then we will be sharing these things to social media. So if you're following us on social media, Farm Wisconsin, I would advocate that you do that, please. The interviews that you're seeing right now, we've been starting a chat with the farmer so people can ask their questions of specific farms that we advertise in advance of our interview with them. We will categorize those and use those on our activity page. Those will live in our blog. They will likely go out in emails also. So especially in the nonprofit world, we are so challenged to be doing a lot of things with very few people. And the social media, the media landscape, whether that is social media or the regular media, it's so cluttered. We're competing for time. So the chances of people seeing one of your items is a lot smaller than if you repurpose it in other formats. So that's another benefit. So if you create a blog entry, you create your content, please consider all of the different purposes that it can serve. And I promise you that people won't get sick of you unless you get a little, too crazy. But that is definitely something that you can do. And then when I say other media too, I am thinking that, some of your blog entries are very appropriate as a traditional press release. You can think about some of the other ways that you advertise, and maybe some of those blog entries work well with your advertising plans. Maybe it's a future magazine article if it's a printed blog entry. It can play a role in interviews in the future. And then certainly, and big thing that we did with Moraine Park and my previous college, we would repurpose our blog entries as our content for our annual report. And if you work on an annual report, you can certainly appreciate that notion of having content to be able to pull from so that you're not creating the wheel as you approach that annual report project. Tip number 4. Get personal. This is one of my favorite pictures, and this is a lesson that I have learned since starting at Farm Wisconsin. So when I say get personal, for nonprofits especially, we have such great stories. So here I'll share a little bit about myself. So this is my daughter. She's the younger of my 2 kids, and especially last summer, my 2 kids, my son is in 8th grade, my daughter's in 6th grade. They came to Farm Wisconsin with me at least twice a week, and they volunteered. And they, and so another part of my personal story is I grew up in Kiel, Wisconsin on a dairy farm. Farm Wisconsin to me is super personal. This is my dream job, representing a facility that educates the public about Wisconsin farming. For me, I am like so many farms. Our family is so similar to many, many throughout the state, where we were that traditional quintessential small Wisconsin dairy farm. I didn't aspire to have the same lifestyle that my parents had. We never went on vacation as kids unless we could drive there after morning chores and return before evening chores. But I just love that lifestyle. It was just, I would never trade it for the world. At the same time, I would never choose that as an adult. So my kids know my parents' farm. Now my parents are in their 80s. They are still living on that farm, but they sold the cows 20 years ago. My favorite parts of the farm were feeding the calves. So when coming to Farm Wisconsin and being able to share with my kids what farming was like, it has, for me, brought my past to real life for my kids. So seeing my daughter's face as she's feeding this calf just makes me melt. And that happens in when I come upon this picture while I'm giving tours of the facility. Sometimes it kind of takes me aback. And I was told on one of my tours this year, we were advertising that we were going to be doing a calf camp. And so this picture was on the little display for the calf camp. And I got kind of caught up in it, and I exude my enthusiasm for what I do and what this represents. And one of the visitors on that tour just pulled me aside at the end, and he said, "Don't ever lose that. That was, of all the great things that you showed us here today, the highlight for me was you talking about your kids and what this building means to you because you're a mom to these kids." And so I keep that in the back of my head, and I am proud of this. I'm so proud of our facility, but I'm proud of my story and my place within our story. So I try to use that to keep it real. I love the stories that I have seen when school field trips come through. I see that enthusiasm. I see how much the kids are learning, and I just, when people walk through our facility, they're not really sure what to expect, and they always leave with such great sentiments. So that is what I want to tell. I will also tell you right now, through this pandemic and the stress that we have been under, I am trying to I like to be positive. I don't ever want to be the woe is me person, but we have to be able to share with people that our case for support. And for me right now, getting personal is telling, like, every day I get an email in the morning of our event calendar, our internal system that manages our events. And it kind of takes me aback, like, oh, today we would have had that school field trip. I think that when I share that with our board, it gets personal for them. When I tell them, like, how it makes me feel every time I see, like, oh, we would have had 250 people here today with the conference center. That's what makes it real. And so those are some of the sentiments that I'll be sharing in our content as we move forward. So I just want to encourage you to not just think of content in the ways that you have thought of it before, but really try to figure out what gets you, and would that work for you? Just try it on a couple people if you are afraid to put that out there to the world. But getting personal is, in the nonprofit world, is how people will latch on to you and feel for you. I'm just going to take a little break here and look at, oh, thank you, Gabby. All right, so my next tip is listen. I have some of these visuals that work for me. Whoopsie, I'm going. The old adage of we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. And whatever visual works for you. So I'm going to use 3 visuals here because I think this tip is so powerful and so important. Too often we, as institutions, as nonprofits, as marketing people, we think about what we want to say. We think about what we want to tell people. It is so, so, so important for us to think about what people want to hear. The best way that I do that is to think about my own habits in my inbox. So of all of the discounts that I have signed up for and given my email address for, all of the emails that I get, how many go right to my junk or just sit there and never get opened? Which ones do I click on? I'm not on social media as much as I used to be, but when I have been on social media, what are the kinds of things that grab my attention? It's probably not when somebody just wants to advertise at me. It is going to be when people are thinking about what I want, when they make it personal for me, and when they are maybe addressing some of the trends and things that are working for other people. So that is the easiest way. If you consider that visual of listening, 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 your two ears and 1 mouth, or the the megaphone on the ear thing, the dog with the big ears, just think about, are you listening? So choose topics that get a response. So this is a great way to measure whether you are on, whether most of your content is going out to social media, whether it's going out to emails. A great way to know whether it's working, whether you are having a good ear to the ground is if one of your objectives is to elicit a response, are you eliciting a response? What is your click rate? What is your engagement on any individual social media post? What are the kinds of headlines that are working for you? I think that is really key too, that as you, whatever type of content, again, if you're not into blogging, that is totally okay. A lot of my frame of reference comes from blogging, but you want to be choosing a headline, the opening statement of your individual communications that has the end user in mind. So that headline is either going to draw them in or have them skip right over it. So visualizing it in the social media feeds is another great way to make sure that you are listening and watch those responses, selecting the content that best fits the target audience. Tip number 6, find your balance. So this is just one example. This is not the be all end all. I just want you to be thinking about not having all of your content be exactly the same. So in the nonprofit world, it will be really, 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 really tempting for us to do a lot of the promotional stuff. We were guilty of that for a long time. We would hype every event that we had, that, all the registration deadlines, anything that promoted us, what we wanted. We were talking at people. So in the nonprofit world, maybe you want to more highlight your cause. And again, going back to a couple tips ago with the making it personal. So maybe 40% of your, I just have a tendency to think of everything in terms of a pie chart. So I think of okay, my pie chart, I want to maybe make sure I'm making 40% of it highlighting my cause. Then maybe only 30% is my hyping. There is a place. We do need to advertise what we're doing. It just cannot be 100% of what we send out. We will not be listened to. We'll lose our credibility and certainly our engagement. Don't forget, as you are thinking about listening to your public, think about why they are, whether your content is going out through email, whether this is a social media thing, whether it's your annual report, a magazine that you do, whatever it is. Remember that your target audience needs to be also entertained. They are wanting to be enriched. They're wanting to be entertained. They are on their computers. They're picking up information for many reasons, but don't forget the value of the entertainment. So maybe having some photos or other means that you have that would fit that bill, just keep that in mind as well. I always think there's a little place for inspiration, especially in the nonprofit world. So whether that's a quote from, one of your reviews, perhaps, if you have been reviewed like we have. Maybe it's just a comment that somebody said, like for me, it's at our front desk, how we are just so blessed. Number one, we have such a cool experience. We're so blessed with our guests that come through and are so willing to share. And I'm sure that many nonprofits have that. And if you're not a nonprofit, I know that this was targeted at nonprofits, but I think this certainly applies for other types of businesses as well, that you are getting good feedback. Maybe it's about your employees, or volunteers, or your product, your services. Share those quotes that you've gotten. Or maybe there is a meme out there. I love memes. So maybe that is something that would also elicit a response. If, again, going back to your objective, you have to find your balance in this way and in another way. With your, going back to, if you are challenged with the notion of finding content, getting through a writer's block, finding the types of posts that work for you so that you can have a blog. Just you have so many opportunities. So here specifically is a list of types of blog entries. So people are often intimidated by content, and they think, because they think of it, whether it's blog content or other, they think of it in the traditional narrative sense. And for one thing, writing is very intimidating for a lot of people. Then don't do it. There are so many different options. Think about it from a different perspective. So in addition to a traditional narrative approach to any writing, specifically a blog, you could think about lists. Something was just flashing, Abby, on my screen, so I don't know if I did something wrong. So feel free to interrupt me if you need to. The traditional narrative approach can be highlighted, it can be augmented with lists. A video also serves well in a blog entry or in any content other than print, obviously. Maybe it's a photo intensive. I love telling stories of, through photos. If we had an event, the photos and captions are great. Well, that can be a blog entry. That can be many different types of marketing content. A Q&A format. So this is something, so like I said, at Farm Wisconsin, we're going to be doing more blogging, and we're going to be doing blogging in the period. We have such a great network of agricultural advocates, whether it's the farmers themselves, the processors, the agronomists. We just have really great partners, in addition to educators in the field, just our volunteers, whatever. So we intend to reach out to these types of advocates and do a question and answer. So at the beginning of this, if you were on for the beginning of the call, I mentioned how we have just started doing Chat with a Farmer as part of our social media content. And so that's a perfect example of the Q&A. Like, we could never have expected people, like busy farmers, to blog for us, but and come up with their own content. That would be very intimidating for a lot of people, but we can make it easy by just providing them with a few simple questions. Maybe somebody's an expert and they could just describe how to posts in social media are super popular. So maybe that's something that is appropriate for your organization. A case study of something that went very well for you. A guest post. So you don't have to carry, and I'll get into this a little bit more here shortly, but it could be who would be the perfect guest, just a one-time guest, and that have them type up. It can just be through an email, and they can provide you with a great angle on a topic. And maybe it is a review. Maybe you're reviewing something that is appropriate to your audience, but I'm just trying to get you to find balance by not being choked with the thought of traditional narrative all the time. Tip number 7. This is one of my favorite tips. In the marketing world, I think those people in marketing departments often feel the weight of the world on their shoulders. And this was my saving grace with starting the blog in my first college that I worked for several years ago. Getting help. We created our blog in the format of a crowdsourced blog. And that is what I mentioned, that my predecessors had tried using students as their bloggers and deemed that unsuccessful, and we were really troubled to find people that would take on the concept of blogging. We set up our blog to be that anybody who was an employee automatically had a login to the blog. Now, I know that, I'm sure that sounds intimidating to you. Like, I would, I'm sure you can all think of coworkers or people that you wouldn't want publishing live to your blog. And that is the beauty of workflow. So like I said, I'm a big fan of WordPress, and within WordPress, there are workflows that specifically allow you to assign roles to people. And those roles include just being a contributor, so that there are people who can edit a post before anything goes live. And in doing so, you establish your hierarchy. So in that scenario that I mentioned, we had the entire college. Anybody who was an employee could automatically log in and contribute to the blog, but it wasn't contributing live. They could create a post, but it would sit in the queue until some of the other roles were able to. I tend to advocate for just having administration and the contributor in maybe in different settings, and having the layer of editor makes it easier too if you have a very large organization. But just having people create posts, and then they sit in the queue until somebody can review them for various things, whether it's, you don't want to have too many posts published at the same time, so you might want to just delay them. You definitely want to check for grammar, make sure that it's on brand, that there's certainly nothing inappropriate. But what we did a lot of times too is we helped them just spruce it up. So people maybe didn't have great photos that they were able to include with their blog, so we would do that for them sometimes. So but again, the theme is getting help, to not feel the weight of the world, because I would definitely feel that. I'm sure if you feel like, if you have the annual report coming up, you feel the weight of the world on that giant piece. Think of how you might use storytelling and marketing content to be able to ask other people to contribute. But especially with that blog, I just can't advocate enough for the concept of the blog. That was my tip 7, the getting help. So I am at the 12:38, which is kind of where I thought I would end up. What I did want to say though, I just have my contact information here. So if you have specific questions that you haven't asked here, please feel free to contact me through either my email address, patty@farmwisconsin.org. I list my cell phone number here too, which is the quickest way to reach me these days, as I'm here in my house in Plymouth a lot of days, but I am obviously checking my my devices at Farm Wisconsin as well, and I get in there every once in a while too. So here's a question that I will just read. With restrictions of number of people, how should someone manage venue costs for an event that will have to limit the number of paying attendees? Are there other creative ways to fundraise for venue? What benefits do venues like to see from the organizations that are holding events? What exchanges can we offer for discounts in price? Wow, I would invite some others who might have ideas here to contribute there. With our current situation, I think we don't have a lot of options in the very short term. What we are looking at doing, as we are looking at our business at Farm Wisconsin, we are definitely going to be limiting. I don't think anybody thinks that we're just going to flip a switch once we are able to host events. I think the events are going to be smaller in nature or more spread out. What we are advocating for, we are trying to look at what our outdoor spaces are and how we can maximize that opportunity to spread people out. There are certainly many resources that we are relying on for best practices in hygiene and cleaning up between, keeping facilities clean, anything that people touch, certainly providing the PPEs to people who come in the facility. I think that is all things that we have discussed, but I'm sure some of you are already trying things like our current platform of Zoom for getting creative with event ideas. One thing that we are thinking of right now, I feel like this is, I'm probably going to get in trouble from some of my colleagues at Farm Wisconsin, but we're looking at drive-through opportunities and how cool it would be to be able to drive through some of the outdoor spaces on our grounds and provide some of those outdoor things that I've been, you know, if we have pens set up outside with different animals in them, and just create more of an outside experience so that even when our restrictions are lifted, that there's more of a feeling of security because of the space that outside, you know, I just keep thinking about that person who's, when somebody coughs, how people are going to feel. And so we want to make sure that we are providing for not only what we know, but also for how people feel. That is the biggest change that we have been undergoing at Farm Wisconsin, even before the pandemic, that really embracing the feeling that people get when they come through our facilities. So we're focusing on the experience. And now because of the pandemic, our experience has to include people's fears. So any way that we can mitigate those fears is going to serve us well. All right, I think there's another, I don't know if I answered, but I would certainly invite others with better ideas to maybe type them in the Q&A on your Zoom too. Are there any other questions I can answer? Thanks, Jenny. I'll leave it for another minute, but there are no open questions right now. But I really appreciate for those of you who have joined us today. And Abby, I invite you to, if you see something different than what I am seeing on the questions, if there's anything, because I keep seeing a more, and I don't know what I should be looking for with the more.
No, I don't see anything at this time.
Okay, very good. Well, great. I really appreciate this opportunity. I hope you were able to take some tips away that make you feel less like a deflated football and more like you have some solid strategies to be able to take with you and increase your quantity of content and your diversity of your content. But I would certainly, I can talk all day on some of these topics. So this is me trying to fit within the time frame of your lunch hour and the lunch and learn. But certainly I'm kind of a nerd for this, this topic. So I really encourage you to get in touch with me individually after this if I can answer any other questions or keep an idea going for you. Thank you so much.